This is a short bite episode of Homeschool Together. Hello and welcome to Homeschool Together After Dark edition. We're going to continue with this series of games that you kind of play with, 12 and above kids.
Yeah.
And, put those little kids to bed and play with your little bit older kids, still cultivating those same kind of critical thinking skills, logic skills, strategy skills, all the same skills that we talked about before, but in more complex games.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about probably one of our favorite games.
Yeah, this is the one we always reach for when our friends come over. They always ask to play.
We were almost, we were just saying right before we started, it was kind of our least friction game between the two of us. Like, it's a game where we both like it and we both will play it any time.
Right. Whoever suggests this is always I'll play that.
And this is Space Base. And I think we've mentioned Space Base a couple times.
Yeah.
In past episodes, kind of teased it, but this is one of those games that I don't know what it is. I love rolling dice.
It's just something tactile about it.
It's fun about rolling dice.
Dice is like a classic, right? They've been rolling dice for hundreds of years. It's just it's a fun thing to do, and there's been so many different takes on it, and I love this version of it. So Space Base basically is a game where you're going to have a board in front of you with 1 through 12 slots, and you'll have cards in those slots. So when you roll your dice, let's say you rolled a 1 and a 5. You could either take the reward that you get on the card in the 1 spot and the 5 spot, or the reward that you'd get in the 6 spot. So either one of the individual numbers or the sum of the two. And you're going to use the rewards that you get from those cards to buy new cards to replace in those slots, is basically how the game flows.
And I think, we've talked about this, a dynamic that we like to see in games, which is where every time there's a turn, regardless of who is rolling, that there's actions to be taken by all players.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't get into that like death spiral of somebody who hems and haws and waits and everything, and
everyone else is just waiting for them. There's no actions for them to take.
It's 5 minutes until it's your turn again. And that's just not something we like to do. We want to keep it lively, keep it active. And Space Base is, I think, that perfect example. So as Ariel said, you're going to be potentially buying new cards. And then once you buy a new card, what's cool is the card that was in that spot, as we like to say, graduates. You take it and you flip it. And what's cool is on the graphics on the card, there's your main board activity, action, whatever that action is. But when it graduates, you flip it upside down and then tuck it under the board on that slot. And what that bit is it becomes an action that you can take if that...
A reward you get.
A reward, whether it's money, whether it's points, whether it's increasing your starting spot for every single turn, whatever that might be, you can score those points when somebody else rolls the dice. So for example, if I've graduated my 5 spot and my 6 spot, and Ariel rolls a 5 and a 6, I can then score those on my own board. I don't have to wait till my next turn to score on my main board. I can score on my graduated area.
So you're getting resources on other people's turns.
On everybody's turns. And so the whole goal is to really just graduate all your cards up so that you're scoring on your turn, which is the main board, or you're scoring on the graduated area. And what's really cool is you can begin to stack cards on like the 4 spot,
really
the 3
fun.
spot. So when you roll and somebody rolls a 3 and you got 3 cards that have been graduated, you can score some serious points and you can get some big time resources. And it's just a race to a victory point element, but it's got this great element of luck. In the main board in front of you are 3 piles of cards, and they have like a level 1, level 2, level 3.
Which is really an expense level,
it's
right?
An expense
the
level,
cheapest, mid-priced, and then
most expensive,
and then most lucrative cards.
And those are the cards you can buy. So they'll have a price. So say it's like 5 gold pieces. You buy that. You can then place that into whatever number that indicates. It'll say up in the corner, this is for a 4. And so you'll play that into your 4 slot. And again, that's the 4 for whatever the dice is rolled. So if the dice rolls a 4, you get that resource. It's such a great gameplay. And the fact that you're having to either make these really hard decisions on whether or not you take both numbers or you take the combo of the numbers, right? And once you get above 6, when it's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, all the way up to 12, those rewards are really lucrative. So
they can
it really entices you to choose the combo versus the individual.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of theory, a lot of gameplay. We really, really love it. It's such a fun game. It's also light in the sense that it has a space theme, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, the theme
all
isn't
about these
very
ships,
strong in this
But
one.
the artwork is really cool.
It's cute.
Every ship has its own name. It's really wild. Like
Yeah.
if you actually pay attention to the cards, which it doesn't really matter. I mean,
Yeah, they're
space is-
all little like cartoon ships. It really, what I think is cool too is the cards that give you rewards. It's not just like points. Some of the cards will say, it'll point to 2 cards over, right?
Oh,
so if
yeah.
you put it in a good spot and 2 cards away is a really good reward, it'll point towards that. Or there's a charging element that some of the cards, when you've rolled that number, instead of getting a reward, you get to put a little cube on it. And then that cube allows you to do some special action during your turn later. So, and what's lovely is every card says on it, in symbols, exactly what it does. And there's a really handy guide if you have any questions on it. So it's really easy to know.
There's a lot of cards. Like there's like, I don't know, maybe 100
I don't know,
different cards.
There's tons of cards.
Some
We've never been through the whole deck.
Wild things. But there's the great card, the game over card.
Yeah.
It's for the 12. I think you charge it once.
No, you have to roll a 12 5 times.
5 times.
5 times.
I thought it was like a 2.
No. You have to roll a 12 5 times. And the card
it's
says
charge.
You win. So if you charge all 5, you win.
And our friend was playing with her
boyfriend. They actually bought the game after they played it with us so many times.
And she got that card. She bought it. And
Yeah.
she put it out and she rolled 5, 12, and she won.
Right.
This is game over. You
So
win.
what I love is this is a great strategy game.
Yeah.
It's great to think about where this is wonderful for probability work, right?
Oh, yes.
Roll of the dice is always, there's this element of luck, and sometimes some numbers get hot in different games, and it's like everybody's always rolling 5s, and the next game no one can roll a 5 to save their lives.
Yeah.
So that definitely happens, but there's a big element of probabilities here, and where you want to stack your board to get the most rewards per turn, per everyone's turn. So
And
it's really great.
It's great to show that to, a young kid who's getting into math, to show that distribution, that kind of that bell curve where it's more probable that you're going to get a 2, 3, 4, 5. So you want to graduate those cards more often than to spend all your money on the 10s and 11s and 12s because those are just more rare. And just for them to see that and see that your card tends, if you're playing it right, will tend into that kind of nice.
They'll have a nice distribution.
And you'll see the winners tend to do that.
Yeah.
And so it's fun to see kind of the math coming out into the game. And it's for me as a math, I'm kind of a math numbers, I love to play with numbers. It is such a fun game. I love playing this one. And what's really cool is if you play it a few times, you get comfortable with the cards, you understand the cards that are coming into the deck on the 2s and the 3s, the second level and the third level cards. You start getting into combinations like, I'm going to charge this thing and this thing's going to trigger that thing to happen. And it's going to trigger this thing. So you could have these really wild, combination gameplays, or you can just play a simple, easy game. You don't actually go into those, more complex actions. You can just play it very simply.
And still win the game. There's lots of valid strategies with it.
Many different strategies.
It's really fun because there's lots of different and unique cards. They all say what they are on them. Everybody constantly gets to build up resources. You're learning about distributions. It's fun. We've played it with your mom, and she really enjoyed it. I would say a kid who's maybe 12 and up, maybe if you've got a really math savvy younger child, but I would say maybe 12 and up would be good for this one. And it can play in about 45 minutes or so, and that's I think pretty accurate. So this is a 2 to 5 player, which is nice. Not all games, especially really nice games, go to 5 player. So that's really great. It's a high quality game. There's a bunch of expansions. We don't actually have any yet. That's on my list because we would love to. And I think that those expansions actually play through kind of a legacy element where there's a storyline to them. I think there's maybe 3 expansions so far. I would say for us, we've had this for a couple of years now, and it's definitely in our top 5 games that we like to play. It works awesome as a 2-player game. It's great as a 4 and 5 player game.
And if you've played it a few times with your wife, you can actually have conversations while you're playing. And
it's not so intensive.
It's not very, the way we described it, there's a lot of actions, there's money and there's charging elements and all this stuff. And it's once you play 1 or 2 rounds of it, not like the full game, like you just do a couple rounds of the table, you're just like, wow, this is a very like simple and easy and fun game, and you can just have a whole conversation while you're playing with it. So it's really not that intensive, and so we loved it. I don't know where we stumbled upon it. Where did you?
Yeah, I think I
like,
heard
Dice
about
Tower?
it on like Dice Tower somewhere.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's nice too is it's not a very interactive game between players. So one thing that if you've listened to us talk before about games, Matt's he's like a shark. He's very good at games. He's great at strategy. If there's too much strategy and not enough luck, he'll strategize me into losing. He doesn't strategize himself to winning. He strategizes me to losing, and he's very good at it. And so one of the things that I like sometimes is games that don't have a lot of interaction between players.
Yeah, there's none here.
There's none here. So it's not, one player cannot hurt another player's board. The only thing they can do is take a card that you might have wanted. They can buy a card before you got a chance to buy it. But otherwise, and there's a few different games like that I appreciate that he cannot actively mess with me. So he's shaking his head like he hasn't totally done this before. So that's one thing that I do like. Sometimes it's nice to have interaction, but if you have kids who are who feel particularly sore about being like picked on, quote unquote, games where you have to like steal cards from somebody else or do damage to somebody or whatever it is, you have kids that have a problem with that. Low interaction games are really great because it's really just them and the game, unless you bought the card that
they're playing the game in front of them and they're trying to get the points before everybody else, but it's just them, and while everybody else is playing the same game. It's very, if you think about it, more decentralized type of game where everybody's Seven Wonders is like that too, where everybody's just playing their own game, but we're all kind of interacting. And
you're going off of the die roll.
You don't feel isolated where you're just away from them, but you're all playing it because the common the bidding system on the game on the tiles that are, or the cards that are in front of you,
the buying system,
that kind of brings you all into the game together. But it's, you're right. It's not, I'm not like destroying your ships or anything.
Right.
Like
Every
that.
turn you get to buy, and just for clarification, there's no bidding, like auctioning. There's no auctioning. I hate the auctioning element in games. This one doesn't. It's just buying. But you're trying to get the cards before somebody else does. And you're cognizant at different times in the game, you play it differently, right? You're going to be building up cards at some point in the game. And then at other times, and those cards you're going to want to get more money in those cards to help you buy more and better cards. And at other points in the game, you're going to start shifting and buying cards that are all about victory points. So you do have to be aware of where everyone else is at so that you can make that shift at the right time.
The end of the game is almost always the same, where it's just like you look up and you go, oh no, and you start buying the victory points at the end, right. and then the game ends, in like 3 or 4 rounds, and then it's over. But you realize somebody crosses that magic 70 victory point because it's a race to 100. And if you see somebody cross 70, there are these nice tiles. So there's the 3, we forgot to mention, there are the 3 level cards, but also there's a special 4th, area of cards that are 1 through, what is it, like
1 through 12.
1 through 12.
And they
are just victory points. And when you play that on your board, you could no longer buy any cards for that spot.
Right.
And the higher the number, the more expensive it is. It could be like 30.
So you can use money to basically buy yourself to victory.
That's typically
but they're
how
very
the game
expensive.
Ends,
It's one of these things, and whenever you're building anything in a game, it always kind of starts off slow. It takes a while to ramp up, and then at some point it's going to go hyperbolic, and it'll when you finally make the bend, then the game is over quickly. But it takes a long while to build your engine.
It's also a game. Yeah, you're right. We've talked about this. The engine
building,
especially in a game like this where it's like resources to get cards, to get more resources, to get cards. There's an engine, a dynamic there that is being built. And at first you're barely able to afford anything, and the numbers are not coming up, and it just feels, it feels like, oh, I'm never going to be able to do anything. And then like 5 rounds later, it's like, okay, I'm going to buy a 3 card, and I'm starting to think about my game plan to the end. It's so fast how it just ramps up. That first round, you're like, oh, wow, this is going to take forever. And then like round 3, you're just like, okay, I'm going to win this game today. Yeah.
I like that they seed you with a card in every slot to start with. So it's not like you start with nothing. You're seated with very low value cards in all of the slots. So no matter what's rolled, if it's on your turn, you're going to get something. But you don't have any cards at all in your upper graduated slots. You have to put them there.
You have to buy those, yeah.
So yeah, you're gonna always get resources on your turn. Whether you get them on other people's turns is a factor of whether or not you've graduated cards. So it's a great game. It's a wonderful dynamic. We have fun every time we played it. I don't know how many dozens of games of Space Base we've played at this point. It's just a perfect date night game, perfect for family game night with those older kids. So it's super highly recommended from us. Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time,
Happy homeschooling!